Hey guys, so I just finished this book a little while ago, and originally I was going to let everything sort of sink in so I could process everything that I had read. I really can't because I have so many thoughts banging around in my head, which explains why I'm sitting here in the middle of the night making a video for you guys. Yeah, this isn't going to be a review video, it's more just my thoughts regarding the book. Um, Having said that, there will be a lot of spoilery content in this video. It is impossible to talk about this book without giving things away. So if you have not read it, if you do not want to be spoiled, if you do not want to know what happens, please, I urge you to move on to a different video. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I will be talking about certain things, including the ending. So this is your one and only warning. So those of you who are leaving, farewell. I hope to see you again sometime. And those of you staying, strap yourselves in. I will do my best to be organized. I have a list of notes. And yeah, okay, so Clockwork Princess. It is the third and final book in the Infernal Devices series. And at the end of book 2, which was Clockwork Prince, things had sort of exploded for our three main characters, Tessa, Will, and Jem. Will found out that this curse that had been hanging over him for his entire life, in which he thought anybody who ever loved or cared about him would die, it turned out not to exist at all, and he goes to profess his love for Tessa, only to find out that Tessa is now engaged to Jem. And yeah, it was a very, 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 very dark ending, very sad ending for Team Will fans. And this book picks up shortly after the events of Clockwork Prince. The very first scene is Tessa being fitted for her wedding dress, and we find out very quickly that much like in the mundane world, shadow hunters believe that it is extremely bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, and so of course what happens? 2 pages later, Jem sees Tessa in her gold shadow hunter wedding dress, and all hell proceeds to break loose. And if that is not a foreshadowing of what is to come in this book, I don't know what is. And this book is very heavy, so I'm going to put it down now. Okay, so there were 3 things that I found very surprising about this book while I was reading it, and there were 2 instances of me wanting to rip this book to shreds and throttle several people. First of all, the things that surprised me. First of all, since the beginning of the series, I have been a steadfast Team Will girl. It's not that I didn't like Jem. I always loved his character. I always loved Jem's character. I just preferred Tessa with Will, especially after the last book. But from the very beginning of Clockwork Princess, I found myself shifting more and more until I was firmly planted in the dark side and on Team Jem. Can't believe I'm saying it, but it's true. I don't think that Cassandra Clare necessarily wrote him in a different way than she did in the last 2 books, but I will say hands down, Jem is the heart and soul of Clockwork Princess. He is the star of this book, whereas in the first 2 books he was somewhat of a background character. This time he was very much in the forefront. Even though he wasn't in the book as much as Will and Tessa, he was the heart and soul of the book, and I absolutely loved him. And something else that I found surprising was that a character that I absolutely hated in the second book, Gabriel Lightwood, ended up being one of my favorite characters this time. He did many, many horrible things in the second book, and he did some pretty screwed up things in this book as well, but he was fully fleshed out, and he had his reasons. He had a reason for everything that he did, and he was extremely devoted to his family and to his father, and that explains a lot of what he did in the previous book. And he was just a great character. I absolutely loved him. He was far from perfect, but he definitely redeemed himself in the end, and I loved him. Now, on the flip side of that, my girl Tessa has long been one of my favorite female characters in YA, and she's been very strong and independent, and she is not afraid to get down and dirty and kick butt with the boys. And in this book, especially the first half of this book, she just was not that at all. She was very, I hate to say it, but she came off as being very weak and helpless. I mean, there's 2 battles pretty early on in this book, and Tessa pretty much just stands around and does nothing. You know, she's sort of the observer. She's just watching everything happen. Will's younger sister, Cecily, however you say her name, she did more in those battles than Tessa, and it really was infuriating to me. I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe she was just standing there. I was like, get in there and kick some ass like you normally would, like you would have in the last two books. Of course, it does change to a certain degree by the end of the book, but that just was very frustrating to me at the beginning of the book. Okay, so something that I didn't really like, it was kind of confusing, the whole Jessamine thing. They made this big deal out of how she was coming back from the Silent City and being let back into the Institute, and they made this big thing. There was people who were accepting of her coming back, and then there were people who were just steadfast against it, and they built this whole thing up, and then she shows up and she dies like that right away. I mean, it just made no sense to me why they even bothered bringing her back. Yes, she sort of imparted some information that Will needed, but still, it made no sense as to why bring her back just to kill her like that. It just whatever. So we find out once and for all what Tessa is, and it's not really a surprise. Tessa is a warlock. Kind of called that. I also called the fact that she is a Starkweather. She is Aloysius Starkweather's granddaughter. Kind of made it obvious when he took one look at her and said how much she reminded him of his granddaughter, so that again wasn't a surprise to me. But I'm glad that they just came right out and said it and didn't leave that hanging. So that was good. Now we come to the first part of the book where I wanted to rip it to shreds and strangle someone. Jem and Will, in the scene after Tessa has been kidnapped and Jem has convinced Will to go after her, and Will has confessed to Jem that he was in love with Tessa. Now, first of all, they're pair body. They're supposed to be closer than brothers, share a soul. How the hell do they not know that the other is in love with the woman that they love? How? I always assumed that Jem knew in the back of his head that Will loved Tessa, but he just loved Will too much to ever throw it in his face. I don't get how they didn't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it doesn't make sense, but whatever. So it was heartbreaking. It was very beautifully written. It was touching, the scene itself between Jem and Will. And then fucking Sophie, a character that I had liked up until that point, had to ruin everything and go and tell Jem that Tessa loved Will back. It wasn't bad enough that I think Jem, part of him knew that she loved him after Will confessed to him. But no, Sophie had to tell him because she couldn't bring herself to lie to Jem. No. So, of course, what happens? Jem gives up. Doesn't want he tells everybody to stop looking for the cure. He wants to give up. He wants it all to end, which I knew was going to happen. And that, oh my God, I was so mad. I was so mad, in fact, that I almost walked away from the book right then. I was like, are you kidding me? This is how you're going to have this character go out? He's been hurt so much, and this is how you're going to have him go out. I was so mad. Ugh. Do you get the impression that I was mad? Yeah, I was mad. Which leads me to the other scene where I wanted to rip this book into little tiny pieces. Will finally finds Tessa, and he tells her that Jem is dead. And Tessa's crying and heartbroken, and they're sharing their grief, and 2 pages later they have sex. What? What? You just found out that your fiancé is dead. And what do you do? How do you console yourself? You sleep with his best friend. Makes perfect sense. Oh my God. Oh, you have no idea. Oh my God, I wanted to kill both of them. They spent all this time beforehand with Will saying, "Oh, I could never be with Tessa if Jem dies, because I would never want to be second best. I would never want I would never want Tessa to think that I was just waiting for Jem to die so she could be with me. And they make such a big thing with him saying that repeatedly over and over and over again. And Tessa feeling, having the inner monologue with herself saying basically the same thing, only in reverse about Will. And then what happens? 2 minutes after he tells her that he's dead, they have sex. And they're professing their undying love to each other. How fucking... I can't even think of a word to describe the fury that caused inside of me. And this is coming from somebody, like I said, who was a Team Will supporter. That sort of put the nail in the coffin for me as far as Team Will. I gotta move on from that, or I'm gonna sit here for an hour and just rant and rave about it. Okay, here's something else. Will's younger sister, Cecily, she was introduced pretty much at the end of Clockwork Prince, and I didn't really have an opinion of her at the end of the last book. But having read Clockwork Princess, not really a fan of her. She sort of came off as very bratty, and selfish. Yes, I do realize she is Will's sister, so they do share some of the same traits, but yeah, I mean, there's a scene where Jem is literally dying. He's literally in his deathbed, and she is resentful of the fact that Will wants to spend time with Jem rather than spend time with her. Yes, I realize she traveled a long way. She wanted her brother back. She needed him in her life. But how selfish could you possibly be that Jem is Will's best friend, is his pair body, and you resent the fact that he wants to spend the last few moments, the last day of his life with him? Really, bitch? Really? Yeah. So, were you surprised about Jem? Were you surprised that he didn't die? That he, in fact, became a silent brother? Because I really wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of speculation that Will was going to end up becoming a silent brother with the introduction of Brother Zachariah and the Mortal Instruments, and the supposedly different kind of silent brother. He was attractive. He knew of the Herondales. There were two people that he would have killed for. A lot of people just assumed that was Will. I thought that sounded more like Jem, and I figured that would allow Will and Tessa to end up together. And yeah, I thought it was a great way to keep the three characters in each other's lives. Yeah, because she kind of made it impossible otherwise. If Jem died, obviously he wouldn't be there anymore. But the book still needed the dynamic of the three characters together, and I think that was a great way for her to do it. So, the epilogue. I was pretty much crying from the beginning of the epilogue to the very end of the book. Not just because it was like this was really officially the end of the series, but it was sad. It was so damn sad. I really hated the fact that Will died. Even though he was an old man, and I knew that he and Tessa lived a very happy, very long life. He was 86 years old. They had children, they had grandchildren, they had this beautiful life free of ducks. And the whole scene where he dies and Jem comes to him as a silent brother and he dies holding both of their hands. It was, oh my God, it was, oh, oh God, yeah. It just, I wasn't happy that we saw him die. He was 86. Part of me wanted them to just go off into the sunset and just be happy. But then, if that would have happened, then we wouldn't have had the actual ending of the book, which is that 100 years later, or not 100 years later, but it was in 1937 when Will died, and then in 2008, she finds Jem on the bridge, and he's no longer a silent brother. He found his cure, but that means he's human now, and I mean, he's mortal now, and they can be together again after all this time. And I mean, I have really mixed emotions about the ending. I mean, I think it was as close to a perfect ending as Cassandra Clare could get, because in the end, I think all the fans got what they wanted, which was I think everybody always said that they just really wanted her to be able to have both guys, and she made it possible. She found a way to make it possible. And just the actual ending where she sees him on the bridge and he's Jem. He's no longer brother Zachariah. He's no longer a silent brother. He is mortal and young and beautiful, and they get to go off into the sunset and live a happy life together, even though you know that he's mortal and that she's going to see him age and die and she'll be left behind, so she'll have lost her the two great loves of her life. But okay, so to sum up, um, despite the frustrations that I had at times reading this book and with some of the characters, this was really undoubtedly a fantastic and perfect way to end the series. And yeah, it was wonderful. I love these characters, and I'm just really sad that it's over. So thank you, Cassandra Clare, for creating this world and giving us these characters. And I can proudly sit here and say, with not an ounce of embarrassment or shame, I am Holly, and I am Team Jem. I love you, Will, but my heart belongs to Jem. So there you go, guys. So if you have any questions and comments, as usual, leave me some love in the comment section. And again, please refrain from leaving nasty comments, you know, giving me hate because I spoiled the story for you. I warned you at the beginning of the video, so yeah. Anyway, so I will talk to you guys soon, and thanks for watching as always, guys, and happy reading.